Good morning, all, and welcome to another Jump Advisory recruitment discussion. And this week we're looking at getting the most out of your managers, the blueprint for management accountability and team success. Yesterday, as we know, was International Women's Day. There was loads and loads of posts on LinkedIn, which was great. And this week we have a panel of experts, of business leaders who are all female, who've run large SME recruitment agencies across the UK, who I'll introduce to you in a moment. But let's look in today's stats. And today we're going to look at a mixture of stats between female-only stats and then mixed stats, so we get an understanding of managers' performance. Management levels, according to the McKinsey report from 2016 to 2021, showed that women in management still have not reached the parity yet with men. They're close in certain levels, but not close at all, really, when you start to look at it. And so you start to think manager, and remember, these are American terms: manager, senior manager, VP, senior VP, which is vice president, and C-suite. Managers are now 40%. So 40% of managers are all women, which is great. Okay, and that's an increase over the from 2006 to 2021 by 4%. However, in the C-suite, it's only 25%, although that has a 5% increase since 2016. Employees with women managers are more likely to say their manager has supported and helped them over the year. According to the Small Biz Guide website, businesses who have high representation of women in leadership roles had a 35% higher return on equity and a 34% higher total shareholder return in comparison to male-dominated environments. According to the Clear Company report, companies organized with, or companies and organizations with higher than average levels of employee engagement saw a 27% higher profit and a 38% above average productivity. 71% of all employees believe their manager cannot name their strengths, but feel that if their strengths were engaged, it would energize their work. So many executives struggle with engaging issues, but then haven't realized that they can kill two birds with one stone by engaging people within their strengths and giving employees feedback that creates engagement within the workplace. 95% of managers reported they are unhappy with the traditional performance review style. 51% of employees believe their annual reviews are inaccurate, and 53% said they do not motivate them. Only 50% of the workforce strongly feel as though they understand the expectations on them and those expectations set by their management. Companies are highly engaged workforce are 21% more profitable, and 58% of employees said they would stay at a lower paid job if it meant working for a great boss. 61% cite trust with their senior management as the most important issue with regards to their satisfaction, and only 46% of employees said that they have a great deal of trust for their employees. So it says there's a massive amount going on with that marketplace. And when we listen to it, managers who receive feedback on their strengths from their employees showed an 8.9% greater profitability. Sorry. As always, I'll post the links in the chat box where I've gleaned all this data from, so you've got time to read them. But it says that your management teams, you are the catalyst to success or you stunt the business growth. However, managers aren't all to blame. The leaders of those managers are also in the firing line with regards to how people run their business and develop their business. So this week I'm joined by Heather from Jump, Paul and Dave are on client site down in Bristol for today from there. So we decided to sort of go into our marketplace and see what we've done. So we've also joined by two very experienced managers and leaders of businesses. So first, let me introduce Annette Thorpe, who's been the MD of G2 Legal for the last 21 years. G2 has over 100 employees and has grown by 12% in the last 6 months, according to LinkedIn. From there, G2 is one of the leading privately owned legal recruitment companies with offices in the UK, Australia. So welcome, Annette. Our second guest is Leanne Goodwin, who's the MD of JobWise. Leanne started in JobWise as an administrator 29 years ago. Can't believe that, Leanne, but that's true. Okay. And he's now running the company. So JobWise employs approximately 60 people, according to LinkedIn, and has a 7% growth in the last 6 months. And since 1979, JobWise has specialized in placing people in office positions, accounting, administration, call centre and customer service across the Northwest. So we've got a great team to start to sort of look at management and look at it from both a male and a female perspective and work from there. So the recruitment industry. The recruitment industry has a good gender diversity at management level. And one thing's for sure, that the percentage of women in business leaders is probably higher than any other industry. On International Women's Day, we start to celebrate and reflect on this. And as women leading successful recruitment businesses, why do you think recruitment is a place that women can thrive? Now, Leanne, you said you'd love to jump in on this one first. So I'm going to open that up to you. Why do you think women thrive in that marketplace?
I did actually. I did say that. I was all right with the first question. So yeah, welcome everyone. Morning. Thanks for having me today. I think, generally speaking, women tend to, and this is a very generalist thing I'm going to say, but tend to score higher than men in some areas to do with emotional intelligence. So they tend to score higher at emotional empathy, and I think emotional empathy fosters rapport and chemistry, which I think is so important. Recruitment ultimately is a people business, so the fostering of rapport and chemistry is key to building a team. It's key to working with your candidates. It's key to working with your clients. I think that's really important. I think women in general are quite, dare I say, nosy, maybe probing, probing more, understanding more, and genuinely caring about each other. I think that's again, a generalist, a higher trait in women. Fact-finding, conversation, really listening to people. It's been proven that women are better listeners than men. Again, generalist, and encouraging team building. So I think there's a lot of traits from a woman leader that is very useful in particularly a recruitment business.
Can you just say that again? Because I wasn't actually listening to that, Leanne.
That's what my husband says all the time.
Annette, what's your thoughts on that?
Good morning, and thank you for having me here. Well, I endorse everything that Leanne has said there. I think emotional intelligence is in the main a strength of females. But I'd also like to say that I think that recruitment generally is a profession and a sector that actually anyone can thrive in. And I think the reason for that is because you can come into recruitment from various backgrounds, all different backgrounds. You don't need any specific qualifications to be a good recruitment consultant. And quite honestly, I think that for a lot of people, they haven't gone down that qualification route anyway, or gone to university. It's about somebody's personality, their motivation, their passion for doing the role, and just generally having a good attitude. And I think that women as well as men can, start at very much an entry level and work their way up based on their own abilities. And I think that's why women thrive in the sector along with the men as well.
Heather, you looking at you from a HR point of view, what's your view on this?
I don't know if it's a HR point of view, but I would agree with both Leanne and Annette's point of view, particularly that thing about the kind of low barrier to entry. You don't need a particular set of qualifications. You don't need to come from a particular background. And the other thing is, it's very objective whether somebody is successful. So the measures of success in recruitment are absolutely objective in terms of delivery of service, jobs, candidates, placements, all of those things are very, very objective. And so there's no subjectivity that creeps into decisions about success and reward and potentially promotion, which I think gives a really strong base for women to feel that they can be successful from, and really helps with having that really balance, because we're just measuring objective data. And so we're not interested generally as an industry in who's doing this, as long as they're being successful. And so there is, you don't get bias in the same way as you do in some more subjective industries. The other reason I think you get women entrepreneurs like Leanne and Annette is to start a recruitment business, you don't need necessarily to go and get huge amounts of funding from a financial institution. And we do know that women entrepreneurs can sometimes struggle with getting startup funding. But you can start up a recruitment business without that. So all you've removed one of the barriers there straight away in terms of structurally, it's hard for women entrepreneurs to raise finance. You don't need to raise finance to start a recruitment business.
So I think it's interesting that I look at it from a male point of view, and I always say the best recruiters that I've come across have always all been almost female. And for whether it's the reasons that you three have described or not, but I find that they have a better relationship with their clients and a better relationship with their candidates. Sometimes that relationship with their staff may be a little bit slightly different. I've met some really excellent male recruiters, but I think when the balance itself out, it's always been sort of women have always been a little bit more aggressive within the marketplace, because I think they have something more to prove in the marketplace. And as Heather said, I think this is a marketplace where you come in with equal footing. And therefore, if you are wanting to prove yourself, you have that ability to prove yourself without the glass ceilings. However, I do think in recruitment, the glass ceiling comes when you get to the high-powered positions. It is very, very male-heavy, and that's where it needs to change. And I think when I was sort of in big companies, when you try to push that diversity agenda, it was almost frowned upon at certain points. For whatever reason. And I still think what you said there, Heather, is absolutely right. The barrier to entry is so much lower, hence why a lot of females, when they get to a certain level, leave companies and start by themselves because they feel that they can't get that next rung up the ladder. And I think that is an important point to make. And I think that's why a lot of female agencies that are very successful, because they have that drive and the determination to prove people wrong. And I think that's a real point from there. So if we looked at this and then said, regardless of gender, as a leader, how do you motivate your managers to deliver? Now, I know you've got a wide sort of network throughout the UK and Australia, etc. How do you motivate your managers to deliver?
I think it starts obviously at the top, actually, Howard. The way that I like to sort of lead a team, whether that's, the other managers or all employees, is absolutely through collaboration and cooperation and communication. Those are the three sort of C's that I think are absolutely critical if you are going to make a success of your business. But it's not a case of one size fits all. I think that everyone within the firm, no matter what within a company, no matter what their role is different and goes about things in a different way. And that means, therefore, that your management style needs to differ to reflect the differences that you've got within your team. And I would say that my approach would be tailoring my style towards each of the managers, and they in turn will approach it differently with their own team members and adopt their own style. And you obviously have to be very credible, authentic. Earning of trust is really, really important, obviously, and show that you are working with sort of passion to work to a common goal. I think that's really, really important.
Leanne?
Can I say all of what Annette said? I think the 3 C's, definitely collaborative, really, really important. I think if I was to say, anything in addition to that, it would be empowering them, giving them, I know when I was rising up through the ranks from an administrator into a team leader role and a manager's role, I think my line manager gave me such confidence in myself to give things a try. And I think that's what I'm trying to foster with my management team, give them the room to fail in some cases, because I think by failing you learn from that and then you can pick yourself up and carry on. I think the other thing that's really important to me is there's no blame culture. I think, people can get things wrong. They trust you. You mentioned trust in it there. I think that's one of the most important things to build trust within the management team. And encourage them, align them to the vision, align them to, the values of the business. I know we'll probably talk about coaching later on. I think that's such a big thing, how to motivate people, give them that freedom to because I've not got the answers for everything. So actually, by giving them a little bit more freedom, motivates them, gets things right, I think that's a positive win for everyone.
Heather?
Yeah, I didn't endorse all of those things. One of the statistics you said at the beginning that really caught my attention, Howard, was I can't remember the percentage, but it was scarily high. Don't know what the strengths are of their managers, or don't know the strength of their people. And for me, that's got to be how you get the best out of people. And I think, Annette, you alluded to that at the beginning, how knowing them well. You have to understand who your managers and leaders are in your business. You have to understand what switches them on, how to promote them as individuals, what their strengths are, so that you can best give them opportunities to use their strengths to grow, to develop on the areas that they need development on. And so I think real knowledge and understanding of the individual unique things that each person brings to your organisation, in addition, obviously, to the things that Annette and Leanne have said, which I agree with.
The stat was 71%, and that's really high. And I said, to motivate your manager, you need to understand your manager, and you understand what motivates them and what drives them.
It's a really scary stat that 71% don't think their manager understands their strengths.
If you think initially, most managers, don't make as much as the top salespeople, and they're actually probably taking a drop in overall earnings for a higher base commission, a higher base salary, etc., etc. But obviously, over time, if you're a really good manager, this starts to change. But it's about getting the best out of your people, and therefore, when leading managers, the same principle applies to me. It's about understanding your manager, training them to be better than you are, and then I think you sort of alluded to that, Leanne. My view is, train them to be better than you are then, and then get out of their way and allow them to thrive, and start to create an opportunity for them. And, I don't want to be the most intelligent person in the room. I want to employ people who can do that for me as a leader and drive that. So I think, how I motivate my manager is about empowering them to deliver and empowering them to grow, and giving them the opportunity to make mistakes, as you both said, but also give them the opportunity to succeed. And it's then how you reward that success, whether that is via, verbal recognition, corporate recognition, etc. It's not all about the pay structure, it's about the recognition. And a lot of people, I think, go into management with the wrong view. To me, management is about the development of the people below you, and those people then will develop yourself to help you develop them further. And I think that's what managers don't seem to understand when they go into that, right, the entry level, that it's not about you, it is about them. And next week, we'll talk about something slightly different, about that step between biller into manager. And I think that's the scariest step, because all of a sudden you stop, you're not in charge of your own pay. Everyone else is in charge of what you get paid. And that's a very scary thing to understand. And hence why I keep saying it's understanding your manager. So it's the same thing from an owner down to their managers, understanding what drives them. So let's flip that and talk about what is absolutely said constantly about managers. It's often said that people don't leave businesses, they leave their managers. So the question is, do you agree with this? And if so, how do you work with your managers to prevent this from happening? So Leanne, let's sort of push that back on yourself.
I generally agree with that statement. I mean, obviously, there are exceptions to that. So if people are changing career or location or, different family situation, there are other reasons for people leaving. But if they're going to do a similar role for, say, a competitor, then yes, it does tend to ring true. I mean, I do conduct exit interviews with all my guys that leave. And whilst they're not always going to be completely honest, you do get a little bit of a feeling sometimes that there is a relationship issue, more so than the reasons that they're really giving me. So I do think it's partly true, and I think it starts at the top. I think from the leaders, the owners of the business, cascades down. So I need to lead by example as to what I expect my managers to do. And I think what I expect my managers to do is engage hearts and minds. That's a phrase there. I use a lot. You know, it's not just about giving them the right pay, the right rewards, the right clarity of goal, the right clarity of target. All that is important, but it's really getting to know each individual and what makes them tick. You know, what is important to them. Flexibility is a huge thing now, and even more so in the last couple of years. Allowing them to work their job around their families, not the other way around, I think is becoming more and more important. And I think feeling relaxed, you know, it's really important that my teams feel relaxed in their day-to-day jobs. So, you know, key that, because I feel if people aren't relaxed, they're not being themselves, and that is an issue for me.
Annette?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as Leanne has said, that some people will leave a business for different reasons, but I think often they do because of the management structure. I think recruitment in the past, certainly when I started out, did have a bit of a bad rep. Some of us, I'm sure, will remember the old days of, you know, it was a sales environment. It was a bit like a boot camp, very aggressive sales attitude, and your worth was measured by how much you build. I'm happy to say that I think that's consigned to the past. I'd like to think so anyway. Recruitment is a sales role. People get into it because they want to earn money, and certainly it's very lucrative. But I don't think that needs to be done within a sort of pushy and an aggressive environment. I think it's more important to make sure that your employees are well looked after. We don't want burnout, as it was referred to previously. We are professionals and we want to do a professional job. I think good leaders and managers will stay in the company as well as employees if you have a very, very clear vision about where you're heading, what the strategy is and the culture is of inclusion, diversity. We've already mentioned that people can come into the sector, into the industry from lots of different walks of life. So you've got that social mobility, which is excellent. So we can reach out to a wide number of people. But you have to create an environment where everybody's got a voice, and that they know they're listened to, and they are motivated and incentivized to do well. And it's not a carrot and stick situation. I think you get much more out of people if you listen to them and as I say, have a culture of inclusion.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you talk about burnout there, and yet, according to the stats that I was looking through, female managers burn out 4 times quicker than male managers. And I think that's probably because of the pressure they're put under, and the pressure they put themselves under. So it's an interesting thing to talk about burnout.
I think that as well, Howard. I mean, you mentioned previously about, you know, perhaps females in the sector do really work hard, and maybe it is because we still feel that we've got to prove ourselves within a work environment. Doesn't matter what sector you're in, and dare I say that predominantly women still do most of the work outside of work, in the home, so they have got that to wrestle with as well. So it doesn't surprise me that if the burnout figures for women are much higher, because I think that you have the pressures of being excelling at work, but also you've got to run a home, and you're the main carer for children as well.
Heather, a quick view on that from yourself, from a HR perspective?
Yeah, just a quick view. Generally, I would agree. I think people do leave managers, not businesses. And I think the bigger your organisation becomes, the more that's true. And I think sometimes that's one of the real challenges of scaling businesses, is understanding that as the leader, the entrepreneur of the business, you can't influence all of the decisions to stay or go. And that's really hard, I think, it's a real challenge to scale. And in terms of preventing it, one of the things I think you could do, in addition to all the things that we've said already, is measure it. So do we measure turnover by individual managers? And that's only possible as you get bigger and you get some scale in the organisation. But, you know, are we actually talking to managers about how well they are retaining trainees, for example? And because we've come across managers in our careers who are great at developing and retaining trainees, and others who seem to have an endless turnover and just seem to churn through them and can't keep them. And so I think measuring it, monitoring it, working on it, focusing on it is actually quite important.
So we go back to last week, that's what we said at the end. If you could measure anybody on anything, what would it be? It would be about retention.
Yeah.
And I always think that the entry-level manager is probably the most powerful manager in the management structure, because they're the person closest to the staff. But in most cases, they don't know how to use that power, and sometimes abuse that power because they haven't had the training. Some of their role models that they're following maybe aren't the best role models to have followed. And they have nowhere else to learn sometimes, and therefore the management structure just sort of replicates itself, etc. So I think sometimes you've got to start to look at that, and certainly some of the training that I've been doing just recently, I've been doing 4 or 5 companies management training over a period of time, and they're seeing a huge difference to how these people now are being perceived, because we're managing them before they get into that management status and train them how to manage people. So they have people on desk constantly doing that. So if we look at managers then, what do you actually make a managers accountable for, and why? Leanne. Annette, let's go to Annette first on that.
Well, I think we've just touched on one of the points that you could measure and be accountable for in terms of retention in their team. I think, you know, going back to things that you've discussed previously in other webinars, that there's a difference between leaders and managers as well, and I think that needs to be sort of clearly defined. Again, it may be dependent on the size of your organisation, but you know, I see a leader as being somebody who sets out the vision of the company and the strategy and where we're heading, and then delegates to and makes the managers accountable for deploying those strategies and how the company then achieves the goals and aims that they've set out within their team. So I think that's what the managers should be accountable for. I think also, as we've touched upon, you know, just because somebody is the top biller in the company and is very good on the sales side doesn't necessarily make them a good manager. That may be a whole different question, different topic. And quite frankly, sometimes, you know, the top billers are definitely not the best people for managers, and they should stay in a sales role. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Every organisation needs their star billers. But you also, if you're going to have growth and develop your teams, you do need people who are aligned with the values of the business to be able to promote that support and culture, and they need to be accountable for that as well.
Leanne?
Yeah, I mean, I personally would start off with the values. The values are so important. Because obviously, you know, the managers and new managers and, you know, even existing are being watched all the time. So you get a trainee coming in, joining that team, they're watching that manager, how they act, how they are, how they deliver the service, how they treat staff. So I think it starts with the value driven, the how we do things, not necessarily the what. I mean, the KPIs, the report on KPIs, the team's KPIs, quite clear. But the values are more the lived, that, you know, what are our lived values? And that is, again, for me, so encouraging others to do the same, leading by example, getting stuck in, not asking somebody to do something that they would not be prepared to do themselves. Yeah, really, really important to me. And asking for help as well. I would expect my managers to ask for help. And giving them that, you know, that communication opportunity with either another manager or somebody else, or me, or a mentor, or, you know, I think that asking for help is a trait that I expect them to, you know, have really at that point.
You completely agree with all of those things. What a fascinating and complex job being a manager is. It really is, isn't it? It's astonishing. I would make managers accountable
and
for their
difficult,
own...
Heather, as well. I think it's not
really,
easy.
yeah, really. I would therefore make managers accountable for their own development as well.
Yeah.
So I would want to talk to them regularly about how they're developing their own skills, how they're reflecting on their own development needs, and how they're then addressing it. So I'd want to have that conversation about development with them. And then the other thing I think that sometimes we don't do in all organizations, and again it's about scale, is I would want all of my managers involved in growing my business. So I would want particularly headcount growth. So I want all my managers to be focused not just on their own team now currently, but growing it, bringing people in, pipelining. So that's the other things I would add into the accountability piece.
This one question is a great debate, I think, and it's a huge debate. And I said, do you make them responsible for the people, or do you make them responsible for their own performance? And where do those two things overlap? And that's when you start to get to the crux of the matter about how complex a management's job is and how it works. And so if you want your manager to be effective, it's what you make them accountable for. So if you're making them accountable for loads and loads of different things that have no meaning to the actual running and the values of the business, then you make your manager almost useless. But if you make them accountable for the things that the business values, and they have to drive that accountability to the rest of their business, then it's all about the growth and it's all about how they develop. And I think your comment there, Heather, about that's making them accountable for their own self-development goes back into that. What are you developing, your people or yourself? But you can't develop your people unless you develop yourself. And so those two are very intrinsically linked all the way through. So for those people who sort of have been through my management training and stuff like that, and those people who've listened on here, I'm a firm believer that coaching is the greatest skill that a manager can develop. So how do you develop a coaching culture within your management teams? So let's flip that back to Leanne.
I think coaching is, for me, so important, but it's a little bit like driving a car. You get into bad habits when you pass your test and you're doing everything the right way, and then you start crossing your hands over. And I think sometimes you've presented with a problem and it's just easier to solve it. I think that's really important for me to remember and for me to remind the management team around me of, because it's so fast paced. Working in recruitment is so fast paced that it is sometimes easier to just give an answer rather than coach. Coaching though, as a delegating, you're allowing the next tier or the team to develop their skills. I read a book, 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. I don't know if
that's my favourite of that whole series of books.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Absolutely
Brilliant.
love that one. Yeah.
And that monkey is on my back, constantly reminding me that it's there. So if you've not read it, I would definitely promote you to read it. That helps me. I think the coaching process, there are certain processes in the coaching that remind, there it is, it's at the side of my bed too. But coaching is so important. And I think the other thing with coaching though, you've got to make sure that the person that you are coaching has the necessary skills to be coached. There's a certain point in time where training is actually more important than the coaching, and leading by example is more important than coaching. So you've got to have the right mix of individual that you're coaching, and remember it's empowering other people around you.
Yep.
Definitely pick up on that last point, Leanne. I completely agree with you, and it is about identifying those people in your organisation who are likely to become the future managers and leaders of the business, and it's not going to be for everybody. And I think we also have to recognise that it doesn't happen overnight either. It's really very much a transitional period, and some people are going to take longer than others. Just because you change somebody's title to a manager doesn't make them a manager. It takes a long time, often years, and I think it means that you have to coach them and train them in the art of becoming a manager and learning a completely different set of skills. When you're when you're a sales consultant for looking after your own personal billings, you're in the main focusing on what you are doing and your activities. The moment you start being responsible or looking after other team members, you've got a whole different skill set that you have to bring into the fore, which you may not have had previously. So, I don't think it's fair as leaders to just dump people into the role of manager. There's a lot of skills that they need to learn to do that. And some people will fall by the wayside or just decide, look, it's not for me. I want to continue being a consultant. And again, that's absolutely fine. But it is really important that you nurture those people and give them the skills and the opportunity to be able to, move forward as good managers. And having that, do as I do rather than do as I say attitude, and for them to be able to ask their consultants, how can I help you to become a good consultant, and what is it that you need from me? It's a completely different emphasis from what you've been doing previously, and I think it's very much a contract between all parties as well. This is what I'm setting out to achieve for myself as a new manager, and this is what I am entrusting for me to do for you as well, to make you a better consultant and to build on the team.
I think there's often what's missing is, and I think both of you have said here, what's missing is that understanding that coaching cultures don't just happen. So there are some real skills that you have to learn in order to be a good coach. And like Howard, I always include that in my management training. It is like riding a bike and driving a car. You've got to learn how to do it. And there are specific skills that are involved in being a good coach. And not everybody, there are some people who are just born like that and instinctively know how to do it, but they're very rare, very rare. And so I think it's really important that any management development that you're giving includes teaching people what is coaching, why is it different from other kinds of conversations and other kinds of development, and how do you do it? What are the skills and the steps and the questions and the process and the contracting and all of those things? So important to give people the skills to be actually because bad coaching is worse than no coaching at all, right?
But I also think on that I think Leanne talked about KPIs. I think managers need to have a slightly different view on KPIs, and it should be kept promise index. So if you're promising to do things for your staff, you've got to keep those promises. And therefore, coaching becomes a huge part of that. And one of the biggest things that I hear from staff when they're leaving is, well, they always promise to do this, they'd always promise to do that, and they never deliver those promises. So I think the first thing I'd start to look at from a coaching point of view is, if you're going to promise to coach, then you need to keep that promise, and that becomes part of your own your KPIs. The flip side of that is, when you start to coach people and develop a coaching environment, and you start to create a multiple, environment that is highly successful, it is generally based on that empowering your people to develop themselves. And that's all based on coaching rather than tell. Yes, Leanne, I do agree. There are certain times where you have to train people. But I also think from that management point of view, and this is where I would change the structure, team leader, etc., I'd start to reduce those titles. I think there's only management will get to a certain level. You are an at-desk coach. You are coaching people at desk every single day, and therefore we should be training people how to coach people at desk, not how to manage the performance of that person, but how do we coach that person to develop themselves further along the line. And therefore you develop a very different culture within your business, because your business then becomes a little bit more self-sufficient. So if I'm asking Annette constantly, all right, Annette, you've come and asked me this question, you tell me first how you do it, then I start to understand where Annette's learning starts and stops, and then where I can start to add to it, rather than starting to sort of start in the middle and just jump in and give Annette an answer that she already knows the answer for anyway. So I want to start to understand that, but also want to empower Annette to say, this is what I know, because that's quite a powerful thing. How many recruiters 3 or 4 months in are still, I haven't learned anything, I don't know anything. And yet when you start to quiz them about what they know, all of a sudden so much more comes out, because they haven't been treated in that way. They're just being told, do this, do this, do this. They've never been asked, what do you know? What bit can I help you with? How do I develop? So that coaching culture to me is really important. So if we looked at the pair of you, and this is a real interesting question sort of before we come to the end, reflecting on your own leadership style and management styles, what would you want your managers to mirror? And just as importantly, what would you try to eradicate? Annette.
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I think we've covered a lot today about culture. To me, I think that's the most important thing, being able to show that you're there for everybody, and being able to support them. I think my sort of leadership approach, if you like, is very much one of encouragement. I want to be lifting people up. I want to be praising them. I want to provide recognition. Obviously where there are gaps in people's learning, to be able to quickly identify those and put that right through further coaching and training. Within my company, we have a great mantra, which is it's all about the team. Together, everyone achieves more, and that runs like a thread in our DNA, really. Nobody operates in a silo. We are all moving together for common goals. And, one word that we haven't mentioned is people being happy. Happiness in your job is so important. I think you will attract staff and retain staff if people are actually happy about coming to work. We spend a lot of time at work and with our colleagues, and I think it's really, really important to have an environment where people feel that they are welcomed. How often do people go into work and actually say good morning to everybody else in the office? I know obviously we're working remotely, but those things just mean so much. So I think job satisfaction comes with people feeling comfortable and valued and recognised in the workplace. And I'd like to think that that's the approach that I take, and that my managers and team leaders for the future will also be adopting, because it certainly brings results.
That's a really interesting comment that you made there, because I had this with some managers who were sort of not performing to the level they weren't. And I said, let's look at your day. And I went in and sort of in the office, I was in the office really early as I normally am, and they came in. And what I noticed, the first thing is they never said hello to anybody. They never said good morning to anybody. And I said, look at how you're starting the day off. You're starting the day off on a really negative tone, that people are walking in, they've almost got their head down straight away in fear of you, rather than you walking, morning, how's everyone doing, etc., etc. And people to ask me, when you look for a manager, what do you recruit? And I said, the first thing I look for is someone with a happy disposition, someone who's actually happy and happy in what they're doing and driving that. And those first things there are so important, and yet so overlooked, because it's so easy to overlook. It's not, well, what difference does it make? It makes so much more difference. Leanne.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, our mantra is love your job, as you probably know. That's our brand. That's what our mission is, to vision is of a world where everyone loves their job. So that starts with me. I genuinely love my job. 29 years, and it's flown, and I love every minute of it. Even the tough times. Not mention the C word. Anyway, the other thing that I think sort of I feel is important as a leader is humility. I've worked for the opposite of that previous to joining JobWise, and arrogance doesn't endear you to your team. I think humility. I have not got the answers for everything, and I think you said it earlier, Howard. There's far more cleverer people in my team than me that have got answers for things that I haven't got answers for. So really listening to people and understanding them is really key. Work ethic, never being shy of getting stuck in. I joined JobWise with not a lot of, I left school at 15, went to work for a bank, wasn't a graduate, didn't go to uni, and I think work ethic really paid off for me at the start, and then I have gained qualifications whilst I've been working, but that work ethic is really important. Leading by example, encouragement, you mentioned there, and I think that's key. And I think the other question that you asked there is that what have you tried to eradicate, Howard? I think, did you ask that? What you're trying to sort of, I think something that I'm quite guilty of, well, I know I am, I've done psychometric testing, is perhaps not finishing things, starting things and not finishing things. So something new and shiny over here, I tend to go and look at. So it's having the team behind me that will make sure we finish things that we start. That's something that I've tried to eradicate by having a team around me that knows that's me and will help with that.
So before you jump in on that, Heather, I'm going to ask the last question, because I think the last question sort of links back to the question that we've just asked, but I think it's an important question to sort of finish on. Managers, and especially sort of team leaders of people, or people in their first management roles, they have, as I said, significant influence over the sales floor. So what do you think as people step into management, what do you think they need from a development point of view to ensure that their influence is positive and productive? So, Leanne.
I think you are maybe having a future webinar around, top billers not always necessarily making the best managers. I think, that can be true. Lone wolf tendencies, maybe. So whilst leading by example is important, it's always understanding that others may do things slightly different to you. That empathy is key. I think positivity, recognising other people's strengths aren't necessarily the same as your own. Positive reinforcement, listening, taking feedback on board, collaborative. I think it's a tough gig, I think, moving up from a salesperson to a manager, and only certain people perhaps succeed doing that.
Annette?
Yeah, I think we've covered so many of these points throughout all the sort of questions and answers, Howard, and agree with everything Leanne says there. I think it's a really, really tough job moving from, a top biller role into a management position. There is a big leap of faith that is required. I did it when in the early days of when I joined G2, billing consultant and then trying to build a team. But I did recognise that I was going to be able to achieve a lot more by having that management role and growing the team rather than just focusing on my own personal billings. As I've said previously, it's not for everybody, and I can understand that for certain people, they get very used to a certain level of income, and it's only which is only about them achieving those results, and they don't have to rely on anybody else for their own personal income. So yeah, it's a very, very tough job, but I think as leaders we're there to encourage the people that want to do it, that want to make that leap of faith, and train them and coach them. And I think also when they do make that step up, it's got to be the team members have to have respect for that person, and they need credibility. So I think those are two really, really important things, along with all the other adjectives that we've
all the
said
other
are needed.
million things that we need people to know. The list is amazing, isn't it? It really is. And I would just add to that, I think there's a need for somebody stepping up into that role. I love that example, Annette, of understanding that you could have a bigger influence in that role, that you could, you could develop teams around you, and therefore go on to have a bigger influence and bigger impact. And I think helping new managers to see that vision so that they make that step up from choice, but also to understand that the skills and behaviours that they have so successfully exhibited to get them to the point of you wanting to give them that opportunity aren't going to be the same skills and behaviours that are going to help them to be successful as a manager, and helping them to see that and to recognise that there is going to be a gap, and that's okay, because it's a whole new set of skills. I've seen too many first line managers just carry on behaving like the lone wolf that you described, Leanne, and wondering why the team aren't coming with them when they're making decisions for themselves and not for the team. And so helping them to recognise what the role actually is, and what those skills and behaviours are going to be that are different, and to help them with a development plan to get them.
I think from my point of view, when I was in this position, I was your archetypal selfish, and then probably a lot more selfish is on top of that sales consultant. And I realised when I moved into management, and I just wrote 3 words: not about me. And that's all I thought about from a point of view. If I could influence 4 people, I'd have 4 times the more power. And that's what I thought about was as a manager coming into it, that it wasn't about me. It was all about influencing others. And the more I influenced them, the more they would bill. The more they billed, the less I had to bill. And therefore, I started to think about that tipping point of being the biggest biller to being the smallest biller. And then could I move on from being a non-billing manager? And it was really interesting sort of driving that sort of scenario when you've got management above going, why aren't you billing? Why aren't you billing? And I'm going, but look at my team's billings collectively, they're twice as big as what we were doing before, etc. And it's having that understanding from your peer group above and below what you can actually influence and how you influence it. So to me, it's not just about influencing. To influence the figure, you've got to influence the majority, not the single person. And that to me was the biggest thing that I sort of took on board when I became a manager, which fits in with what everyone said there and how to work. So we're going to close it up there. Leanne, Annette, thank you very much for your input. It's been most delightful. It's great to listen to other people's thought processes on there. And yes, Paul will be back next week, as hopefully will Dave from there. But next week, we are going to talk about one of the hardest roles in recruitment. We've been talking about it today a little bit, stepping from being that top biller into a billing manager. And we're going to talk about what experienced people need. We might bring some guests in to have that discussion because we think, it's a long time since I did that. I did that in the sort of late 90s. It's 20 years since that was relevant. So we might bring some more people in a little bit more relevant on that. But I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. How do you take your top biller into a manager without damaging your business? Ladies, thank you very much again for your time. Ladies and gents, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you all next week. Please look out for our emails. Please look in your junk and spam because we've just changed our email system. So if you haven't received an email this week, check your junk and spam. It should be in there. Ladies and gents, enjoy Wednesday. Enjoy the sunshine. It's nice and sunny here in Yorkshire, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.